Welcome to DVC Alumni, where every story inspires the next. The Alumni podcast where you get to hear the inspiring stories and transformation that DVC has had to offer its alumni. And now, on with the episode.
Yeah. All right. And we are live here at DVC Alumni, where every story inspires the next. And we have our wonderful Floris. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello to all the viewers. My name is Floris Broussard. I'm an economics and business major at DVC in my second year. I'm originally from the Netherlands.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about, so you grew up in the Netherlands, and before we were discussing, your mother was Korean.
Yeah.
Adopted as a young baby or something like that. And so you grew up in the Netherlands, speaking, a plethora of languages compared to most citizens of the United States. And one of the things, one of the things that you were commenting on is how many more cultures you got exposed to. It wasn't as monoculture as certain areas. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, when you grow up in Europe, especially in my country, like you can bike through the capital in like 30 minutes. And when you have, right, like, and in Europe, it's so cheap to travel, right? Like you can go to the UK, you can go to London for like $10. Like you can go to Paris for 20, and there's just so much more of an accessibility to kind of travel. I think probably because like the infrastructure is so much better to kind of travel throughout Europe, that you have a larger exposure of like those cultures kind of intermingling. And I think in the United States it's a bit different because it's more where everyone's kind of an immigrant, right? And that's like a celebrated, and that's kind of the unifying like commonalities that people have, that everyone kind of came here from somewhere, but is here as an American. I think that's what we actually really like about America. That is, you can be here from a different culture, but still be able to bond with someone because you're universally kind of an American. I think that's probably the biggest contrast I have.
Yeah. I was thinking about one of the things you were talking about earlier was that in the United States, we seem to be much more driven. It's much more intense, whereas in Europe, and I've heard this from a number of folks, and I know the very little travel I've done overseas is like that. It's like pretty much, it's 3:00 time to take a break. Here it's just like, no, I work through lunch. And have you noticed that as far as a contrast goes, or?
Oh, absolutely. Obviously, like being in California, I think it's the most like Europe. I've been in like New York, and I feel like people are obviously a bit more driven there. No shame to Californians, of course. But I think it's really to just do with this pursuit of like this ideal, right? These American ideals of having a family, being a self-starter. And I think people, for some reason, they're just much more driven to do those things here, to have almost no PTO, to have almost no vacation days, compared to like Europe, where you have paid maternity leave, paid leave for all these things. I don't know, it's just a different culture. I'm not quite sure where that's from.
Well, one of the things I was thinking about is we were talking about that was, the United States has had one war fought on its soil, and it was fought back east. It wasn't fought here in California. And that, well, there was a couple others. It was the War of 1812. I mean, it was a long time ago, way before I was born. But there was a Civil War, War of 1812, and the Revolutionary War. And so the rest of it has been, whereas Europe has had just in the last 150 years has had, it was running through it wholesale. And so I guess you get that point where it's like you'd be a lot more focused on your family and things like that. So
I think the difference is economically also really striking. I think in Europe, everyone there's not really a big difference between like rich and poor. We certainly don't have like a lot of homeless people on the streets because the social welfare in a lot of countries are organized really effectively. In the US, it's obviously a bit lacking to that regard as well, where there's much more differences between rich and poor. But I think a byproduct of that as well is that more people are striving to be richer than like people in Europe, I think, are. There's just a different kind of pursuit in what it means to be successful, I think.
Okay. Yeah. So how did you end up getting from the Netherlands? Did you go to high school and everything there? And
I did. Yeah, I transferred to a high school in the United States. I didn't finish my high school there. Yeah.
Okay. And where did you end up from there? I mean, how did you get here, first of all?
Yeah, so I went to the United World Colleges in Mexico, USA. The United World Colleges, for example, they're a chain of, I think, over a dozen schools throughout the world that I kind of aim towards like young change makers who want to have kind of an international education and to make a change in the world. There's a lot of them in Europe, there's a lot of them in Africa, a lot of them in Asia. I actually took a summer course in, I think, 2019 and one in China. And there's even one in my country. And I was so like overjoyed and like impressed by the experience of growing up and going to like a school where 95% of the people are international, that it was such an interesting learning opportunity for me to kind of immediately apply to that program. And I was finally selected to go to New Mexico. And I think in my class, we had 200 students, and I think only 4 of them were American.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So
and that was in New Mexico?
Yeah, it was in New Mexico.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So these folks all came from all over the world?
From everywhere. Yeah, you'd have probably like 1 representative per country at least. Yeah.
Okay. And
the most would be like 2 or 3 people from the same country.
And they flew from overseas to get here?
From everywhere.
Wow.
Most of them are all full scholarships as well.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's impressive.
Yeah.
So what was, I mean, that must have been really, I mean, that's certainly different than the high school experience that I certainly did, you know, but, and so then you went from that, and then how did you end up here at DVC?
Yeah, so I think around 2021 when the pandemic happened, our school was like a boarding school, and it was really kind of isolated from the rest of the world. And a lot of students had felt like a lot of the similar pressures where it didn't feel like the traditional kind of college experience, the high school experience they were hoping for. So a lot of them, including me, decided to kind of end their studies early and go back home. And I think going back home was definitely kind of a break in my education, but I think it was actually ended up being one of the most rewarding things I've done, because I basically, without the pressure of going to get my education, I was able to get a lot of work experience, working for like four years to be a grant writer, which is basically where I write for like applications.
All right, so you're a grant. Now everybody's going to come out of the woodworks. Hey, you know.
Yeah, but it was for the largest nonprofit in my country for single parents, and you know, after a few years of that, I really kind of found my purpose in life, and I wanted to supplement that with kind of going to a school. And I think the United States was the best opportunity for me to really get that solid foundation in kind of an educational background for me to get better at the work that I was doing.
Okay, so you're still focused on the nonprofit, and the helping others and stuff like that. So. And now that everyone knows you're a grant writer, it's just like, yeah, your phone's going to start ringing probably. But so you end up, why did you pick DVC of all places? I mean, I think it's obviously a wonderful place to be. I had several kids that went out here, but what was the thing that kind of sold you on?
Yeah, I knew that I was kind of probably going to have to head to California, as California was very holistic in schools that kind of have non-traditional students, especially like transfer students. And I knew that I ideally wanted to go to a community college because it had that flexibility of kind of seeing what kind of subjects would interest me. I actually picked it was either between DVC, De Anza, or Berkeley City College.
Oh.
I think I picked DVC. I toured all 3 schools. I think I picked DVC in the end because I felt like there was a really interesting like college vibe that was going on here, and I could tell that a lot of people were very genuine in kind of what they're doing here, and that there was a lot of kind of space here for me to kind of grow and like research a lot of things that I wanted to do. I mean, obviously the DVC has a high transfer rate to Berkeley as well, but I think more than that, there was this kind of serenity that I really appreciated here that had such like capacity for like thinking and like doing all these things and kind of finding your way here.
Yeah, well, and the upside of doing the community college route out of the gate is that, especially if you're not quite sure what you want to be when you get done, is just it gives you a chance to kind of get your feet under you without paying that massive 4-year college tuition bill. So, okay. So you get here, and how did you feel about the walk up? I mean, you're obviously a little bit older than kind of traditional, which probably helps too, because you know who you are and stuff like that. So what was that experience like getting in the door? Yeah,
it was interesting. I remember my perceptions of community college first were like that I'd be in a class with like very like old, like adult learners that were having like evening classes. And I guess it was true in like some aspects, but I was surprised that the majority of the class that I was going to, they're just students like me, who had something happen that kind of led them on this non-traditional path. And actually, like the first 2 classes I took were at San Ramon for DVC, and I think 80% of my class were just dual enrollment students from high school.
Oh, wow.
But then I come here and I have like a poetry class, and it'd be like with a lot of people that were already retired that just wanted to kind of hone their arts and crafts. But it's like seeing that range of like people, like individuals that would come here was really interesting to me. I think first I didn't really know what to make of it quite, but I think it's really been one of the most rewarding experiences to kind of meet these people from all these walks of life, right? Like they'd have such richness to their stories that you can kind of tap into and kind of grow and learn from.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is. And I think that's the story of DVC is a lot of people think it's, and this is kind of the thing I try to talk to the people outside the community, the DVC community about is that DVC is so much more than just a place where kids go to school. Because that's really what the outside world kind of looks at it. It's like there's tremendous resources. So now, I just met you like about a year ago, I think it was. You and Anahita were doing the TEDx thing. So talk about getting up to the TEDx things, and then we'll talk about that. So what were some of the things? Because obviously you've gotten very involved with student life here. Yeah.
It's funny. TEDx was actually one of the major events that my high school did. I actually could see at my high school that there were so many students that had so many interesting stories to tell. I mean, obviously being like mostly international, of course, like it comes with the turf. But I could see that same kind of richness and diversity here. And I think, I was part of like the speech and debate team. I was part of Toastmasters, but I think I'd yet to see kind of a platform where a lot of students could have that voice on like a national, like international platform, right? And kind of bring their story on their own terms. And I kind of just seen the success of seeing TEDx as done in other schools really drove me to, set one up here with Anahita and make sure that there is a space for those students to kind of have their voice out there. I knew DVC did one actually a few years ago, but it was mostly towards teachers, and that there was a really large need I heard from students that were really interested in showing their voice at the time, which didn't actually end up happening. I was just really excited when there was finally a chance for me to bring that out to people.
So you talk about the process because I know that was stressful.
That's a process. Right?
Yeah, but I mean, talk about the process, because I learned so much, because I mean, TED to me and TEDx was just something that I saw on YouTube. Yeah. And that was, again, it's kind of like the analogy I would use is that it's a lot like, but people see DVC from the outside. It's just a place people go, or a TED talk is just, that's a little 10-minute, talk about X, Y, and Z. But what's the process like? Because I didn't realize until I got involved with it that it's really in depth.
Yeah.
So talk about that process.
Sure. It's a lot. Yeah, it was definitely, I think we started like 6 months before the events. The first part is just getting like an application from TEDx and like filing and submitting it with them. It's finding sponsors, it's finding venues, and then having the whole application process to find speakers as well was incredibly tough. I think last year we had over 50 applicants over 2 rounds. And, to end up with a selection of like maybe a dozen students, it's quite tough to kind of have to select and filter to all those people and really see what kind of the strongest picks are of that year. Marketing was also really tough. We had to market not only on the DVC computer screens, but we also had to open our Instagram, make sure that we're getting the word out there so that, when it's finally event night, we're going to have enough tickets where it was kind of worth it, which we did, which is great. Just that whole process of kind of coming to terms with it. I think the biggest thing as well, beyond just like the venues, like the logistics of it, was finding out what TEDx would mean for us, right? Like what kind of a project it was like to be. Obviously, we came up with a theme at the time of Empowering Tomorrow. And I think over time, it also became on us to be, what kind of leaders are we? Kind of discovering our own role of leaders through that process and kind of figuring out how we can best kind of facilitate that process as students that are still developing as well, coming years, like first years.
Yeah. So what was for you the big takeaway on that one? I mean, what was the lesson learned? I mean, there was a million lessons, but what was for you like the big kind of takeaway for you on that? What was
I think you start early is always the biggest takeaway after a lot of things, especially with TEDx. There was a lot of things that kind of came up last minute where perhaps like a student speaker had to drop out and we had to find a replacement 24 hours before the event started, or where there'd be times where logistics would fall through, or we have a lot of uncertainties, even on event day, when it comes to microphones, when it comes to videos, audio recordings, venue, like facilitating all those things. And I think relying on your team is really the best way to kind of remedy that, right? Like you need to be able to connect with people that can support you through there, and you have kind of the greatest like network you have to have the greatest range of tools available to you to kind of solve any problem at like a whim's notice.
Yeah. So, and I know unfortunately I had something come up and I couldn't be there the day I was. Well, and I had some friends that went and they were very excited. They thought it was awesome. They thought it was an absolute wonderful experience. So you guys are doing it again. right? And so have you guys gone through the selection process yet?
Yeah, we're actually doing our final round interviews to Thursday. Yeah.
Okay.
And we plan to be a little bit ahead of schedule this year so we can have a lot of those uncertainties kind of resolved ahead of time. But yeah, it should be about the same time next year and around April. Yeah.
Planning for the next disaster as it kind of moves. Well, no, that's how you do events. It's just you plan for.
You never know what's going to go wrong. Yeah.
It's something will go wrong. It's just the nature of the beast. So, and how has it been doing it this time versus last time?
This time it's a little different because Anahita and I are transferring out. So we had to do a lot more succession planning in trying to figure out how to kind of keep the continuity of the event going and making sure that over the next 5 to 10 years, right, like this event might hopefully still be there, and making sure we don't kind of lose the spirit of that in the process. So I think what's different from this year is that we had to think of it a lot more in terms of mentorship, right? Like in having those new apprentices come up and kind of teach them what our experiences were so they can have an even greater experience next time. I think a lot of people are very interested in things like this. And I think it's also what we learned is that there might be a lot of voices and like a lot of hidden space that you might not originally think them to be. But like a third of the speakers that we had last year, for example, were from San Ramon campus, which is, I'm amazed there was that many because San Ramon students traditionally are it's a very small proportion compared to like the most Pleasantville students. And there's students out there at every kind of venue. I mean, even like a speaker, for example, like one of them that I met, that we ended up actually having as one of the speakers, was just at a club's meeting, right? And if it didn't come up at the time, the person might never even apply it, right? And it's like finding those people is the biggest challenge, right? Because like as much as we can be in these clubs, in student government, in the newspaper and all these things, there's only kind of the extent to which we can reach people. And I think trying to at least present the opportunity for the most kind of people is probably the biggest challenge we've had this year. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know that there was a number of restrictions on, because it is an educational student platform, it's you guys actually have to run it. It's like us adults in the room just basically have to sit over there in the corner and keep our mouths shut. And it's I think that's a wonderful experience. But there was a lot of stuff. That was one of the things I learned about was just well, we could do this. Well, no, we can't because that's against the rules. And, and I greatly admire the fact that you guys are working very hard at following the rules very carefully, so you don't have a one-off that's fantastic or whatever, but it breaks the spirit of the event, and so therefore the DVC loses that opportunity to.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a lot of guidelines, for example, like that speeches can't be like political or specifically like with some kind of message that is not aligning with their values, or like even just basic things like having the logo be like up to the code. If any of those things were wrong, they might pull the event's license and kind of retroactively take away a lot of those voices. So we really had to make sure that even one additional speaker was not going to kind of harm the rest of the speakers who fought so hard to kind of be there. And the more people we kind of take on as speakers, the greater the challenge that becomes, right? That we have to like filter through every single speech and make sure that everything what they're doing is up to code, so it doesn't kind of affect the greater cohort.
Yeah, and that's got to be a big heavy lift. It's kind of like herding cats. So you're working that, and you're transferring out at the end of this year. You're going to graduate and head on down the road.
I'm transferring on the spring, actually.
Oh, wow. Okay. Where are you going?
I'm going to Columbia University in New York.
Wow. Okay. So what? I mean, it's a fantastic school. I've actually some kids I coached in softball ended up there, but talk about why Columbia and what was that track like?
Yeah, I applied specifically for the School of General Studies, which is kind of this department in Columbia that has a lot to do with non-traditional students. As an international student, I'm kind of faced with financial barriers everywhere I go, whether it's Berkeley or Columbia. I'm not really getting that in-state tuition, but I think Columbia specifically had so many opportunities for people that had come from these walks of life, right? Like they've had 3 to 4 gap years and had this work-life balance and then come to community college and then come to education. And I think fundamentally what I'm looking for in an education in the United States is getting that range of experiences and kind of get the most of it. So I think I prefer Columbia over like schools on the West Coast because it's such a different environment, I think. And I really want to make sure I'm kind of like making the best of my education here. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll get back to some more DVC experience, but what do you, after you're done with that, because it sounds like you kind of got an idea of what you want to be, now you've done all this stuff, you kind of get an idea of what you want to do. What does it look like for you when you're done going to Columbia and beyond?
Sure. Ideally, I'd love to get a master's in education, probably from Columbia, hopefully as well. I'd love to kind of continue that space in my own country to be perhaps like a nonprofit consultant, or to kind of keep working in that space to do as much as I can with that education. Um, yeah, and I'd ideally just like to just kind of keep serving the communities like the one I came from, specifically single parent families, and yeah, to kind of make sure that tragedies like that, they never kind of stop, but it's at least something I can do in kind of mitigating those things and making sure that there is appropriate responses to those crises, and that there is like aid and structural support for them in whatever capacity that can be, whether that be like a consultant or like a lawyer or policymaker, or anything in that field, that realm of like shaping kind of the structural outcomes of inequality.
Yeah. I think to your point about, tragedies are going to continue to occur. That's the lot of man. I think developing the infrastructure to be able to help mitigate some of that, but also teach people resilience and to bounce back from it, because I think it can actually make them stronger. Because that's unfortunate that we do have to kind of live in that kind of world. But back to DVC. So what other clubs are you involved with? What other activities?
Yeah, sure. So long list. I was on the state director board for Phi Beta Lambda, which is PBL, or Future Business Leaders of America, for California. As a state director, I am the vice president of education for Toastmasters. I also have a position on the associate students at DVC for last semester, where I was the vice president on the San Ramon campus. I'm pretty active also on the San Ramon campus, where I'm the president of Phi Theta Kappa, which is the honor society at DVC, one of the honor societies at DVC, as well as Alpha Beta Gamma, which is an honor society for business specifically.
So in this, I have a contention, and at some point I'll have to satisfy this particular curiosity. It's been my observation that there's a large contingent of students that are involved in student life, the clubs, that are not a member of one club. They're a member of 2, 3, 4, 5 clubs. Yeah. So, I mean, you named off, 5 clubs that you're a member of. Yeah. And I don't think you're the exception. I think you're the rule, at least in that case. So it's like, if you say, okay, there's this many students involved in student life, well, it's like, okay, how many of them overlap? But that's just more an observation. And I think it speaks to the amazing value of those clubs, and then also how committed that the students are to that particular, to the student life.
No, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of overlap, obviously, like with like an honor society or like a public speaking club, where there's a lot of the similar aims. A lot of people are going for business, especially DVC. And I think as well, whenever you see opportunity in any kind of spaces, you tend to kind of see the same people kind of come back, even if it's like a pitch competition, right? Or some hackathon, or like some trip from Washington, D.C., you kind of see the same kind of people applying to those opportunities, simply, I think, because it's just in their nature to kind of go to seek those places out and try to excel and make the most of it here.
Yeah. So speaking of competitions, so you've been crowned again. So talk about that, because you won the what was it? That was the pitch con. Yeah. So talk about that, because this is not just your first time.
No, this is like my 5th time, actually. Yeah. So we came up with the idea of scholarize.org for, I think...
Well, this is the entrepreneur's pitch competition, right? So let's talk about that, what it actually is. So
sure.
It's really a competition for, presenting business ideas.
Right, yeah.
So, yeah. And they do this, in the spring and the fall? Is that correct? Fall. Okay, just only in the fall. All right. So we've gotten that. You've been involved in this, obviously, 5 times.
Yeah.
Okay, so, yeah.
You don't need to list the times.
Yes, I do. Well, not that I need a list, but it's just like, so what was the last couple of ones that are really memorable?
I think the most memorable probably was going to Dallas, Texas. That was for FBLA for nationals. So we won twice at state for first place in California for entrepreneurship pitch for the same category with the same idea. And then moving on to Dallas and kind of seeing these chapters from like Missouri, from New York, from like all these other parts of the United States was like such an interesting feat to have, like to compete like nationally is like something I've never done before. Just being on a stage like that was really tremendously exciting to kind of see that same idea hold up for a lot of other community. So the idea, for example, is primarily to kind of help the transfer process for a lot of community college students. And it was really fascinating to see community college transfers from Missouri, right? Like from Texas, from Nebraska, and like seeing that idea kind of still applies to them, I think was like the greatest, most rewarding experience that we've had recently, because I can really see the viability and like the relevance of like my idea. And I think going into like the DVC's like pitch competition, for example, also kind of was really rewarding because you have that kind of local relevancy, and kind of having that recognition is always a great thing, of course. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I mean, it's probably in some ways, once you've been down that road and you see kind of what works, it's a little easier to kind of tune your pitch a little bit. So, but no, that's impressive that you've had that many ideas that kind of to serve that, because it's not an easy thing to do.
No,
I mean, how many? I know that there's probably 30 people that put forth I think it's that many. It's quite a few.
30, yeah.
And then they go through several rounds, and it's like to actually get up into that, into that rarefied air is really something. How did you feel the DVC kind of compared? I mean, we're of course always looking to pat ourselves on the back, but you got a chance to kind of look at how our programs are, at those pitch competitions. It's like, how did you feel that we fared versus those other community colleges?
Oh, it was great. I think it was, special thanks to Ryan Buckley, professor of business here at DVC. I think the way it was organized, both this and last year, was tremendously professional. I think there was a lot of great setup for a lot of the events, a lot of great judging, and I think a lot of the things were in place that really made it, I think, a really professional competition. I did not feel at all like it was just a community college competition. I think it was even like on par with like the state competition we had for FBLA for the state of California.
Okay.
And I think there was so much in-depth like planning that went into that I can really see. I think the thing that I really like that it celebrates this legacy that DVC has of like doing these competitions, because the pitch competition, as far as I know, has been around for some time, and kind of seeing these things and kind of joining this kind of history of people that kind of excel at DVC is really exciting to see.
Yeah. So we're kind of wrapping up now. So what would you say to yourself? So this is now the kind of the one thing you would tell the younger version of yourself. Not that you're that old. I mean, this is more of a question for me. But imagine you're talking to yourself. You're still in high school, early part of high school in the Netherlands. What would be that piece of advice that you would give yourself?
I think it would be to never kind of be afraid of kind of where life takes you. There's almost so much uncertainty in life, right? Like even if it just is something basic as like transferring to a UC, like from DVC, right? Like from having that kind of solidified plan and then coming here and doing those things, like none of it really kind of follows the plan. But that doesn't mean that things will end up great, because I think if you put in the efforts, no matter where you fare, how things will, even with all the external circumstances that are happening, you're always able to kind of have the best kind of version of success that you're able to have. But I think accounting for that like uncertainty that things might not always work out the way you wanted it to, I think is really mindful. I think it's very useful to kind of make sure that wherever you're going, you kind of keep that in mind so that you never kind of adhere to one plan. Like it's okay to be flexible. It's okay to change your plans. Like I came originally thinking I was going to Berkeley, and then my first year I found out about Columbia, and then I pivoted. Things change all the time, and kind of having yourself be open to those opportunities and to not kind of be stuck to one plan, I think is probably the greatest thing you can do. Like not only in your time here as DVC in high school, but like in any realm of like human endeavor, I'd say.
Well, that's awesome advice, because it's like, you're right. It's like life is really not linear, and to be wholly committed to the plan, even when new opportunities present themselves, is probably not the best thing. Well, I want to thank you for coming in. That was great, and I'll see you at the TEDx.
I will. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for tuning in to DVC Alumni, where every story inspires the next, the podcast for the DVC Alumni Association. You can contact us at alumni@dvc.edu with any comments, and be sure to leave a like and subscribe to our podcast.